Yo, what is going on, guys? SMH Super Mario Hoops back with some more hoops, and today we got another top 50 of all time video for my top 50 players in NBA history. Now today we got Wilt Chamberlain, also known as Wilt the Stilt. And where do I have him ranked all time? Well, as of today I have him ranked at number 8. Now before we hop into Wilt Chamberlain, I'm gonna need you guys to hit that like button. Feel free to subscribe and hit the notification bell as well, because I've been pumping out a lot of videos for you guys. And then also comment down your thoughts below about the whole list or just Wilt Chamberlain in general. But without further ado, let's hop into Wilt the Stilt. Now over his career, he was a 13-time NBA All-Star, and this included every year from 1960 to 1969, as well as from 1971 to 1973. A 7-time member of the All-NBA First Team from 1960 to 1962, as well as 1964, and then also the years from 1966 until 1968. And then he made All-NBA Second Team 3 times in 1963, 1965, and 1972. He was also a 4-time MVP of the NBA, including years 1960, and then he actually three-peated from 1966 until 1968. A 2-time member of the All-Defensive First Team in 1972 and 1973 near the end of his career, and he's a 7-time consecutive scoring champion from 1960 until 1966. And then to add on top of that, he was an 11-time NBA rebounding champion from 1960 to 1963, 1966 to 1969, and then 1971 to 1973. He even led the league in assists one time in 1968, and then he's a 2-time NBA champion on top of all that in 1967 and 1972, along with being a finals MVP in the latter of those two. Now, he has MVP shares in 11 different seasons, 10 where he was a top 5 finisher, a 2-time runner-up in 1962 to Bill Russell and 1964 to Oscar Robertson, and he was a 4-time winner. Now, when we look back at Wilt's runner-up seasons, Oscar had the Royals with a 30-point triple-double stat line near the top of the standing, so it's kind of hard to argue that. However, I would argue that Wilt deserved the one in 1962 over Bill Russell, as he put up a record of over 50 points per game in a single season, 25 rebounds per game. He was more efficient, more win shares, higher PER than Bill. I think it's safe to say he deserved this MVP. Now, when it comes to all-time stats for Wilt, 30.1 points per game is second all-time, only behind Michael Jordan. 31,419 points is 7th all-time. 22.9 rebounds per game is first in NBA history. And along with first in NBA history comes his 23,924 rebounds total. A 26.1 PER is 6th all-time. 45.8 minutes per game is the highest in NBA history. 247.3 win shares is 2nd all-time. 153.3 offensive win shares is 3rd all-time, 93.9 defensive win shares is 2nd all-time, and a 0.248 win share per 48 rating puts him 3rd in NBA history. And of those last 4 win share related stats, he's actually the only player in NBA history to rank in the top 5 for all of them: offensive win shares, defensive win shares, total win shares, and win shares per 48 rating. And I could go more in depth about his stats if I need to, but let's simply say that he is the stat GOAT. I come across people that believe stats are the true definition of ranking players all time and solely prioritize that criteria, and when they do, Wilt is usually number 1 on their all-time list, and that's rightfully so. Now let's look at Wilt the Stilt in the playoffs. And in the playoffs, even though he was a regular season stats GOAT, they do drop a bit in the postseason. His scoring efficiency, win shares, PER. However, his rebounds do improve, as well as most of this has to do with him not getting that support early in his career and carrying a larger load to ultimately become a part of the great Sixers teams and Lakers team, where he reestablished his game in arguably the most dramatic fashion of a player on this whole top 50 list. So by no means was he bad. He put up 20 points per game in 17 of 29 playoff series, 25 points per game in 12 of 29 playoff series, 30 points per game in 7 of 29 playoff series, and even had 4 series where he was above 35 points per game. He actually led the playoffs in scoring once in 1964, and he was an 8-time leader in rebounding in 1962, 1965, 1966, 1967, 1968, 1969, 1972, and 1973. He also averaged 20 rebounds per game in 25 of 29 playoff series, and 25 rebounds per game in 12 series, and even 30 rebounds per game in 3 series. Now, his first several years, he didn't have much luck making the finals on a very poor team. However, he still averaged about 30 points per game and 20 rebounds per game game in all 5 series prior to his first finals run in 1964. And in the series against Bob Pettit's Hawks in 1964, Wilt essentially demoralized Pettit. In the closeout, he dropped 39 points, 30 rebounds, 6 assists on 66% from the field, and then he would face Boston in the NBA Finals, where they were just outmatched. I mean, Wilt was the best player of this series, averaging 29 points, 27.5 rebounds on about 52% from the field, and simply embarrassed Bill Russell despite the Celtics winning 4-1. When they rematched in 1965, this time it went to 7, but sadly the Celtics won Game 7 by 1 point. Wilt again, though, outplayed Bill in the Game 7 and the series, and averaged about 30 points per game, 31.5 rebounds per game on about 55.5% from the field. In 1966, it was the same thing. I mean, Wilt was the best player in the series, but Boston was just too good. And then 1967 came around, and Wilt was done playing games. He decided to change his role more into just being a scorer, but now a primary facilitator for the team as well. To start, he played Oscar Robertson and the Royals, where Philadelphia won 3-1 this series, and Wilt averaged 28 points per game, 26.5 rebounds per game, and 11 assists per game on 62% from the field in what might possibly be the greatest statistical playoff series of all time. That was until maybe 2 weeks later when it had some competition. I mean, Wilt and the 76ers took on Bill Russell and the Celtics again, and much like they made easy work of Cincinnati, they would do the same with Boston, as Wilt averaged 21.5 points per game, 32 rebounds, 10 assists on 55.5% from the field, as he essentially made Bill Russell irrelevant on both ends of the floor and would take his team to the NBA Finals. And in the Finals, no, Wilt didn't average a 20-20-10 or maybe a 20-30-10 stat line, but he still had about 20 points per game. He was the leading rebounder and leading assist guy on his team, and he was the best player on his team as well on really good efficiency. I know a lot of people think the 50-point per game season by Wilt or the 100-point game Wilt season in 1962 is the best version of Wilt, but personally, I think that this is the best version of Wilt. I mean, he made an adjustment himself even though he really didn't need to, and yet it still worked perfectly and led to an all-time dominant championship trophy. And after this, he would take more of a backseat position in the scoring load for Philly and would ultimately wind up in LA. And this is kind of where his career ended. And while we didn't always get to see the fully dominant Wilt, I mean, he still had one more iconic moment on his resume left, and that was being named an NBA champion and a Finals MVP in 1972. Because this time the Finals MVP award actually existed, unlike in 1967 when Wilt won and probably would have got it back then. But Wilt at age 35 in 1972 averaged 19.5 points per game, 23 rebounds per game, 2.5 assists per game on 60% from the field, and was named Finals MVP in the 1972 championship series. And this is kind of a big moment because they brought Wilt into this team to bring Jerry West and Elgin Baylor over the top in their final years. And while Elgin technically retired mid-season before the title, he still would have been granted a ring. And then, of course, the logo, Jerry West as well. But I think it's pretty crazy how nobody ever discusses this season of Wilt Chamberlain when we talk about players that accomplish great things at an older age. I mean, he dominated the glass all playoffs, had the most efficient playoff run of his career, and a top 3 regular season MVP finisher as well. He was first team all defensive and was named the Finals MVP in the end. So this might be arguably a top 3 or top 5, at the very least, version of a player being 35 years or older in the NBA. But when it comes to Wilt Chamberlain, I would say he's properly rated. I think he gets a ton of respect. Most people have him in the top 10, so top 8 shouldn't be a big signal to you. Now, you might disagree, and that's fine. I mean, not everyone's going to completely agree with my list. I think he is kind of comparable to Oscar Robertson, and that's why I ranked him a little bit close. I mean, both were stat legends that hold probably the 2 most records of any players in NBA history in terms of single-season accomplishments at least. Obviously, career totals are going to favor players that played longer. I think both are powerful in the sense where Oscar was the most skilled player of his era, while Wilt was the most dominant. They both were high-level track athletes growing up with insane underrated athleticism. The main reason why I ranked Wilt higher, though, is, of course, in his peak season in 1967, it was insane. I don't know if Oscar would be able to pull that off, to be honest. And also, the accolades do favor Wilt. Now, I don't really look at the Finals MVP all that heavy because, to be honest, you could argue Oscar in the 1971 Finals was better than Wilt in either of the 2 that he won. But I think both were snubbed of an MVP too, which would give Wilt 5 and would give Oscar 2 at the very least. And for that reason, I got him ranked as is. I mean, when it comes to Wilt, he had probably the most unreal athleticism in NBA history. 46 to 48 inch vertical leap, an 11-second 100 meter, a 49-second 400 meter, and a 356 mile, and could bench press about 600 pounds. Now, most of that is word of mouth, but it's no secret that he was wildly strong at this time when you couldn't get access to as much stuff in the weight room as there is today. And the last thing, with all due respect to Bill Russell, I mean, we need to stop making this a debate. I mean, Wilt was by far the better offensive player. He was at the very least close to him defensively, a better rebounder, he was more efficient, a better facilitator, and yet his total trophy case is still pretty close to Russell's, despite Bill winning 11 rings, where, as we mentioned, more than half of the finals he wasn't even their best player. Wilt always outplayed him head to head, and it's just kind of a silly argument. I mean, we know who's better, we don't have to argue that, because Wilt Chamberlain was just a beast. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think about Wilt Chamberlain. I mean, after all, like I said, he is the stats GOAT. If that is your criteria on how you rank players and you use solely stats, more than likely you're going to be ranking Wilt Chamberlain number 1. But did I underrate him? Did I overrate him? Or is he just right at number 8? But I think that's going to do it for me. Thank you guys for watching, and I'm out. Peace.